Oh, hello there. Hi. Sorry. I don't know what I was doing there. Hello, good people. It's Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m., and it's hot out here in northeastern Oklahoma. My goodness, we hit 107 today for the high. Wasn't as hot as it was yesterday. We had about 15 minutes of a thunderstorm really early this morning. It wasn't much of a thunderstorm. There was thunder and a little bit of rain fell, and then it got really hot and really humid. And I'm sitting here just soaking away right now because it's really, really hot. I've got the air conditioner running over here to the side, and if it's too loud, just let me know, and I'll shut it off, and you can just watch me sweat. You're probably going to watch me sweat anyway. So, hi, how's everybody doing out there? Sassafras Red's heading out to the garden, trying to get some work done before it gets dark outside because you got to do the work when you can. I know how that is. I had a couple of days not too long ago where I just broke out the lights and went outside late in the middle of the night because that was about the only time it was going to be cool enough to do anything. Ken says them weeds will be there when you get back. Hello, Vicky. Hello, Mary. Hello, Eric. USCCA has a podcast. We might touch on some of that stuff tonight because we're gonna go. Not exactly political because I don't choose sides, but we'll talk about some issues. Tonight's beverage is, of course, punch. Slightly fortified, but anyway. Lisa's here. Hi, Lisa. I hope you're staying cool. Vicky says, can't hear the AC at all. That's awesome. Oh, well, yeah, you've got a hot tub running right outside your door. Let's see. Yes, 109 degrees yesterday. They say maybe we'll hit 110, maybe higher sometime this week. Hasn't been this hot in a good long while. I think the highest we've ever had in recent memory, well, not my memory anyway, was 1936 in the middle of the Dust Bowl. It hit 115, and we're having that kind of weather patterns again because just hardly any rain. Mary is saying it's cool in Iowa to take a walk. The grasshoppers are. How are the grasshoppers in Iowa, Mary? Because we're going to talk about those too a bit. I've got a few things to show you. I got a few things to tell you about. I've got a story to share with you, and I've got a gnat that's just hovering in midair here for some reason. I don't know why. We're going to open up some packages. Some of them are things that Mary ordered, and some of them are things that that nature gave us. And if Joe Serrano shows up, I've got something to show him too. So, let's see. Tonight's topic is don't wait on someone else to do the things for you that you know you need to do yourself. Katie's with us. There's that old saying, or not the old saying, but the old joke about the guy that's in the middle of the flood and the waters are rising. He gets up there on the roof of his house. He's praying, oh, God, please save me. Oh, God, please save me. And then a couple people come by on a rowboat and say, hey, we got room in the rowboat here. We'd like to come down here into the rowboat and get to safety with us. And the guy goes, no, I'm praying to God. God's going to save me. God's going to save me. And they row on without him. A little bit later, some people come by in a motorboat and say, hey, we've got room down here in the motorboat. Would you like to come down and we'll escort you to safety in the motorboat? No, I'm praying. Good Lord's gonna rescue me. Everything's gonna be just fine. A little while later, chopper flies by, lowers down close to it, and sort of yells out, hey, come on. He goes, oh, no. It's fine. I'm praying the good Lord is going to rescue me any minute now. And the waters keep on rising. They keep on rising, and eventually they come up and cover the house, and the man drowns, of course. And then he arrives at heaven and says, he's talking to St. Peter and says, hey, what gives? I was praying for rescue, and I had faith that I was going to be rescued, and you didn't rescue me. And St. Peter says, well, we sent you a rowboat, a motorboat, and a helicopter. And sometimes you actually have to do some things for yourself. Okay. Before I get started, let me show you what I got in the bag here. This bag. This is this is 16 pounds of corn that we've harvested. I probably want to turn off the virtual background for just a minute. There we go. So virtual background off. This satchel here contains 16 pounds of corn that we harvested earlier today. Sassafras Red's back in the house. Hey! All right, so I've got this. We're going to open up a couple of these and have a look at them and see what we got. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the birds and the bees and the grasshoppers. So this video that I'm working on, it's got a bit of a story arc. And the story arc goes something like this. I'm going to start out by giving you the bad news, and I'm going to show you the devastation and paint a terrible picture in your minds. And then whenever we're all done, we're going to end on a hopeful note. But right now we're in the middle of the story. So the only thing I've got to show you is the bad news, and I figure I may as well get that out of the way now while you guys are here. All right, so how many people have grown corn before? Does anybody here have some experience growing corn? Don't all raise your hands at once. I know a couple of you have. All right, so whenever your corn's growing and you see these big old ears of corn popping off of the side of your plants, and you're wondering, well, are they about done or not? You can always look at the very tops where the corn silks are, and if the corn silks have turned brown, that's an indication that your corn is done and you can pick your corn. But every single one of these ears of corn that I've picked here, you may notice that there's something they all have in common. Look at all these. Here's one here. Oh, well, that's giving the game away. There. Well, here's a nice big ear. What do you notice about all these ears of corn? Anybody? Don't all stand up at once. What do they all have in common? There's no silks. And the reason there's no silks is because, well, you guys remember that video I just did about a week or so ago about all natural grasshopper control, where I set up a temporary fence, a mobile fence, so I can turn the ducks loose in the corn patch. That is because the grasshoppers are in there and they were starting to do something like this. They were eating the silks and they're eating the corn. Right there? See that? Yeah. That doesn't look too good. It doesn't look too good. Now, this is a problem because the grasshoppers are getting really big. Ordinarily, we get them about the size I showed you in that last video. We're now getting grasshoppers that are easily twice that size or bigger. And they have nice, well-developed wings. The big, strong ones that let them travel for miles and miles whenever they decide to get up and swarm. This particular type of grasshopper isn't afraid of anything. And they've been known to strip flesh from bones and things like that. They're called locusts at that point. So, yes, we have locusts. We have locusts in northeast Oklahoma. And whenever they're done eating themselves out of a future meal here, they're going to be getting up and moving to other places. So if you happen to be living someplace where you kind of depend upon this stuff for your economic survival, or perhaps for your food, be aware the locusts are up. The locusts will be swarming soon. They'll be leaving this area and they're heading your way. So that's your advanced notification. You may want to consider, I don't know, stocking up on some canned food or something, because if you're expecting food to be coming out of the United States of America this year, you're going to be a little disappointed. We've got some. We've got some. But as you can see, we have damage. This one, oddly enough, mostly managed to get pollinated. So the problem is those silks that come up the top of the ear of corn. This is what is necessary for the corn to get pollinated. If the corn doesn't get pollinated, the kernels don't form. All right. So this one, we were lucky. Most of them got pollinated. But we have a great number in this bag here. Like, oh, here's a good example. This one here, this is one of the smaller ears that just, well, we barely have anything to show for it. And of course, that spot at the top where the grasshoppers ate through and made a hole, allowed the moisture to get inside, and that let some mold and mildew and rot get started inside of the corn, and that damaged it further. So this is supposed to be a full ear of corn, but this is all we got. Well, here's a nice one. Once again, no silks, and you see the hole right there, right? The hole, that's from wherever the grasshoppers hopped up there. They ate the silks, and they kept on eating. They got down inside of it. On some of them, they've eaten the corn cob. On some of them, they haven't, but they got up there. And in several cases, they got up there before any of the corn was able to get pollinated. And as a result, this should be a very nice full ear of corn, but it feels very thin for some reason. I'm just going to go ahead and peel these husks back so you can see what's inside. They're not all like this, mind you, but quite a few are. So this is kind of the bad news. All right, so you can see these. Let me get that up there. See how these corn silks here at the end have been sheared off? That's the part that was exposed. That's the part that was supposed to get hit by the pollen. But since they got eaten off, they never got hit by the pollen. These are still green. Now the corn's all the way done. The plants have reached the end of their life cycle and they're dying off. But as you can see, none of these silks got hit by pollen. And as a result, we have mostly unpollinated corn. And this is what you have to look forward to all across the Corn Belt here in the United States of America. For this year's harvest, this is what we're getting. Maybe a third, if that much. That's what we're going to get. So whatever the drought doesn't do in, the locusts are going to kill off. Yes, Lisa, it's empty. That's unpollinated corn. It didn't get pollinated. But they're not all like that. I mean, there's still some good news. I mean, we got this one here that managed to get all the way done, and it's actually kind of nice looking. I'm going to remove those red corn silk hairs off of it. This is some of the corn that we grow here. Sort of a speckled purple and white, a little bit gray. So some of it came out okay. And this will dry in nicely, and we'll have corn for next year, and we'll have a little bit left over. I went ahead and pulled up the corn stalks and prepped the ground, and although I'm having to go out 2 or 3 times a day and water it, it's corn silks on the keyboard. I'm having to go out there and water it. We're going to try to get another crop of corn in before the end of this year. And hello, Joe. It's 11 minutes late, and Joe, I've got something to show you. Because we had something else pop up this year on the corn that I haven't seen before. Joe knows what this is. Hey, Joe. You know what this is, right? So I told you I hadn't seen any yet, and now we've got it. So this happened whenever the corn cobs were damaged, whenever the silks were eaten by those grasshoppers, and we had a hole into the corn cob that was made to allow moisture to get in. That allowed this particular little thing to grow. Now here in the United States, this is considered to be a problem and a disease, and they don't like it because you can't really sell corn that has this stuff all over it. But yeah, Eric is right. This is called corn smut. It is edible. I'm gonna probably try it, not while we're sitting here, because I think we have to cook it. But it looks, oh man, it looks kind of nasty. But we did have a few of our ears of corn were covered up with this stuff. So yay! Of course, this entire thing is one kernel of corn that's been invaded by that fungus and it caused it to swell up and look like that. So um, this is somewhat prized in Mexico. They will actually deliberately damage the kernels of corn in the field to make corn smut happen because, well, apparently it's very tasty and it has amino acids that regular corn doesn't have. So if you can have corn smut along with your other corn, it makes for a better diet. But we have a little bit of this that I managed to salvage, and we'll try cooking some of that up. I have not tried it before, but see, dang commies knows about it. Eric knows about it. Jasper Spread says the GMO corn near our family farm has had smut on it for the last few seasons. Woo-hoo. Well, I'm not sure if you're supposed to eat it raw. I don't think you're supposed to eat it raw. I don't want to eat it raw. All right. Now, like I said, it's not all bad news. Some of it came out like this. All right. So some of it, this one too, the grasshoppers ate the silks off. But this is one of the ears that was open already early on, and I was able to get out there and knock the pollen onto the tassels, and it got well. I think this one got well germinated. I think it feels like it. This is what it's supposed to look like, I think. Hopefully. Nice, big, full ears. This is what our corn is supposed to look like, guys. It's supposed to look like this. That's what we're supposed to have. Isn't that pretty? That's what it's supposed to look like right there. Oh my goodness. That's a gorgeous ear of corn. And it's all supposed to look like this. It's not supposed to look all ratty and gross and nasty like the other ones. This is the way a good corn's supposed to look. And this stuff is very sweet, by the way. I know it's a flour corn, but the kernels are very, very sweet. Surprisingly so, to the point where they're not quite candy sweet, but they're very, very sweet. So if you wanted to eat this fresh like corn on the cob, you could. But you want to save this and let it dry and use it for making masa. There we go. Presents from Mother Nature. Well, apparently the corn smut lives in the soil, and so it'll spring up and it'll get on the corn. And the thing that enabled it to get into, there's some of it that's on this cob actually. It turns a couple of the kernels have been turned green. That's an indication that that particular fungi has infiltrated into the corn kernel, but it hasn't erupted into that gall that's made whenever it swells and produces its spores. So this one has been infected, but it hasn't actually turned yet. But this one also has. Let me get that in front of the camera. This one's got a couple of red kernels in it. All right. So the thing that lets that infection take is something penetrating the surface of the corn so that the spores can get inside. And then, of course, the moisture has to get in there to complete the process. Here's another little one. This one mostly came out. Some of these have a lot of really white kernels on them. Some of them look pure white. Danya Business says you have tons of it. I don't have tons of it, but I have been planning on having seeds for sale this coming year. Let me dry it in and see what we've got. And as long as I've got enough to get me through next year's planting, I want to have enough for 2 plantings next year if I can help it. Then I'll put the rest of it up for sale because it's a good corn as long as the critters don't get into it. And I hear it makes a really good whiskey too. There we go. This one looks a little bit funky. So this particular variety of corn every plant produces 2 ears. You have the one big ear, which is like that great big one I just showed you. Like this one should have been. It has one big ear, and then it should have one small ear. So we have one big, one small. So the big one will be up here, and the small one will be kind of down here on the side of the plant. And provided that both of them get pollinated the way they're supposed to, as long as they get pollinated the way they're supposed to, you should be able to get a pretty good harvest out of it. And, oh, I think this one might have some. Oh yeah, this one's thoroughly infected with that. This one already got thoroughly infected. If you left this one sit long enough with the moisture in it, it's going to develop smut galls. Joe is saying there's a company that cans this stuff. Wow. I haven't seen it in the supermarket. The next time we go out to Namhai, which is an international market, I'll take a look and see if they have it there. But if there's any place in town that sells it, that'd be the place. All right, so this is one ear that should have been really big and full, but it feels a little, I don't know, it feels a little thin. We'll see. Once again, silk's got eaten out of it, but where they are sticking up, they're all brown. So brown silks or red silks is a pretty good indication of pollination. So hopefully most of this got pollinated. And it skipped a few. And they aren't pretty, but this one will eat. Now, some of them are good for saving for seed, and some of them are good for eating. So we'll save that one for making some tortillas out of. All right. Darn Commies is saying calendula and horehound repel locusts. Darn it, I don't have either calendula or horehound. I've noticed that elderberry doesn't seem to repel them, though they aren't so much interested in they're not so much interested in the corn or the wild lettuce. I was thinking, or not corn, pecan trees. They're not interested in the pecan trees or wild lettuce. And I was wondering, what if I mixed up a tea of wild lettuce and pecan leaves and sprayed that over my seedlings to keep the grasshoppers off. Do you think maybe they'd avoid eating because they don't like the taste? Possibly, I don't know. Mary said, "Next time we go there, it'll spin me broke." Namai is a cool place. You can find all kinds of nifty veggies there and other stuff. Well, I've got a lot of these to open up. I'm not going to bore you opening them all up in front of you. We've got some more goodies to show you. Before that, I wanted to share a story with you. Let me just go click on this and I'll kind of read it off the screen. This is a story about Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. This particular tale was passed on by Edward S. Ellis in 1884. He was an old man there. The book that it came from was The Life of Colonel David Crockett, and Ellis was one of his contemporaries in Congress whenever Davy Crockett was representative from the great state of Tennessee in the United States Congress. We're going to pick it up where Ellis writes, I was a great admirer of his character, speaking of Davy Crockett, and having several friends who were intimate with him, I found no difficulty in making his acquaintance. I was fascinated with him, and he seemed to take a fancy to me. I was one day in the lobby of the House of Representatives when a bill was taken up appropriating money for the benefit of a widow of a distinguished naval officer. It seemed to me that everyone favored it. The speaker was just about to put it to the question when Crockett arose. Everybody expected, of course, that he was going to make a speech in support of the bill. He commenced. Mr. Speaker, I have as much respect for the memory of the deceased and as much sympathy for the suffering of the living, if suffering there be, as any man in this house. But we must not permit our respect for the dead or our sympathy for a part of the living to lead us into an act of injustice to the balance of the living. I will not go into argument to prove that Congress has no power under the Constitution to appropriate this money as an act of charity. Every member upon this floor knows it. We have the right, as individuals, to give away as much of our own money as we please in charity. But as members of Congress, we have no right so to appropriate a dollar of the public money. Mr. Speaker, I am the poorest man on this floor. I cannot vote for this bill, but I will give 1 week's pay to the object, and if every member of Congress will do the same, it will amount to more than the bill asks. He took a seat. Nobody replied. The bill was put upon its passage, and instead of passing unanimously, as was generally supposed, and as no doubt it would, but for that speech, it received but a few votes and was lost. Like many others, I desired the passage of the bill, and I felt outraged at its defeat. I determined that I would persuade my friend Crockett to move for a reconsideration the next day. Previous engagements prevented me from seeing Crockett that night, and I went early to his room on the next morning and found him franking letters, a large pile of which lay upon his table. Franking letters is kind of going through them and seeing what they're all about, kind of like going through ears of corn to see what's in them and see if there's anything of use in there. Mr. Ellis proceeds, I broke in upon him rather abruptly by asking him what the devil had possessed him to make that speech and defeat the bill yesterday. Without turning his head or looking up from his work, he replied, I'll answer your question, but thereby hangs a tale, and one of considerable length, to which you will have to listen. I listened, and this is the tale which I heard. Crockett speaks. Several years ago, I was one evening standing on the steps of the Capitol with some other members of Congress when our attention was attracted by a great light over in Georgetown. It was evidently a large fire. We jumped into the hack and drove over as fast as we could. When we got there, I went to work and never worked as hard in my life as I did there for several hours. But in spite of all that could be done, many houses were burned and many families made houses. And besides, some of them had lost all but the clothes that they had on. The weather was very cold, and when I saw so many women and children suffering, I felt that something ought to be done. And everybody else seemed to feel the same way. The next morning, a bill was introduced appropriating $20,000 for their relief. We put aside all other business and rushed it through as soon as could be done. I said everybody felt as I did. That was not quite so, for though they had perhaps sympathized as deeply with the suffering as I did, there were a few of the members who did not think that we had the right to indulge our sympathy or excite our charity at the expense of anybody but ourselves. They opposed the bill, and upon its passage demanded the yeas and the nays. The yeas and nays were recorded, and my name appeared on the journals in favor of the bill. And here I'm going to stop for a moment and ask for everybody who's watching, either live or perhaps on the replay, to recall a certain representative from the state of Georgia that made a request every single time a bill came up for voice vote, that the record be kept of who was voting and how they were voting. It's somewhat important, I think, to be able to look at the record of these people and see where it is that they came down on issues and how they cast their votes. If you're going to be in the business of going and seeking out representatives and voting for them, it would be nice to know how you were being represented. I'll resume with the story. But keep that in mind, that at one time, people kept a record, but avoiding being on the record was not uncommon even in Crockett's time. The next summer, when it began to be time to think about election, I concluded that I could take a scout around among the boys of my district. If I had no opposition there, but as the election was some time off, I didn't know what might turn up, and I thought it was best to let the boys know that I had not forgot them, and that I was going to Congress, and that going to Congress had not made me so proud as to go see them. So I put a couple of shirts and a few twists of tobacco into my saddlebags and put out. I had been out about a week and had found things going very smoothly when, riding one day in a part of my district in which I was more of a stranger than any other, I saw a man in a field plowing and coming towards the road. I gauged my gait so that we could meet up as he came to the fence. As he came up, I spoke to the man. He replied politely, but as I thought, rather coldly, and was about turning his horse for another furrow, and I said to him, "Don't be in such a hurry, my friend. I want to have a little talk with you and get better acquainted." He replied, "I'm very busy, and I have but little time to talk, but it does not take too long." Okay. I'm very busy and have but little time to talk, but if it does not take too long, I'll listen to what you have to say. And so I began. "Well, friend, I'm one of those fortunate beings called candidates, and yes, I know you. You're Colonel Crockett. I've seen you once before and voted for you the last time you were elected. I suppose you're out electioneering now. But you had better not waste your time or mine. I shall not vote for you again." Well, this was a bit of a conundrum. There's a different word that Ellis uses, but it's one that's not in common use today. It's a sockdolliger. Sockdolliger means a puzzle or a conundrum. But that's a word we don't use nowadays. Resuming, I begged him to tell me what was the matter. "Well, Colonel, it's hardly worthwhile to waste your time or words upon it. I don't see how it can be mended. But you gave your vote last winter, which shows that either you have not the capacity to understand the Constitution, or that you're wanting the honesty and firmness to be guided by it. In either case, you're not the man to represent me. But I beg your pardon for expressing it that way. I don't intend to avail myself of the privilege of the constituent to speak plainly to a candidate for the purpose of insulting or wounding you. I intended to only say that your understanding of the Constitution is very different from mine, and I will say to you what, but for my rudeness, I should not have said, that I believe you to be honest. But an understanding of the Constitution, different from mine, I cannot overlook, because the Constitution, to be worth anything, must be held sacred and rigidly observed in all of its provisions. The man who wields power and misinterprets it is the more dangerous, the more honest he is." Crockett spoke and said, "I admit the truth of all you say, but there must be some mistake about it, for I do not remember that I gave any vote last winter upon any constitutional question." "No, Colonel, there's no mistake. Though I live here in the backwoods and seldom go from home, I take the papers from Washington and read very carefully all the proceedings of Congress. My papers say that last winter you voted for a bill to appropriate $20,000 to some sufferers by a fire in Georgetown. Is that true?" "Well, certainly it is, and I thought that it was the last vote that anybody in the world could have found fault with." "Well, Colonel, where do you find in the Constitution any authority to give away the public money in charity?" Well, here was another conundrum for me. When I began to think about it, I could not remember a thing in the Constitution that authorized it. I found I must take another tack. So I said, "Well, my friend, I may as well own up to you. You've got me there, but certainly nobody would complain about a great rich country like ours should get an insignificant sum of $20,000 to relieve women and children, particularly with a full and overflowing treasury. And I'm sure if you had been there, you would have done just as I did." "It's not the amount, Colonel," he responded. "It's not the amount that I complain of. It's the principle. In the first place, the government ought to have in the treasury no more than enough for its legitimate purposes. But that has nothing to do with the question. The power of collecting and dispersing money at pleasure is the most dangerous power that can be entrusted to man, particularly under our system of collecting revenue by tariff, which reaches every man in the country, no matter how poor he may be." I should probably pause for a moment here and call to your attention that this was a period in time in the United States of America where tariff was how the federal government managed to fund its operations, not by a taxation on anyone's income. Tariffs were duties that were collected at the ports as goods were coming in or as goods were leaving. It was essentially a fee to use the ports for import and export. This was the taxation power that was granted to the Congress of the United States by the Constitution. But we live in a different time now. Allow me to proceed. The power of collecting and dispersing money at pleasure, yes. It reaches every man in the country, no matter how poor he may be. And the poorer he is, the more he pays in proportion to his means. And this is also of importance, which I'll refer to presently when I'm done with this particular story, so keep it in mind. What is worse, it presses upon him without his knowledge where the weight centers, for there is not a man in the United States who can ever guess how much he pays to the government. So you see that while you're contributing to relieve one, you're drawing from thousands who are even worse off than he. If you had the right to give anything, the amount was simply a matter of discretion with you, and you had as much right to give $20,000 as $20. Oh, sorry, $20 million is $20. If you have the right to give one, you have the right to give all, and as the Constitution neither defines charity nor stipulates the amount, you are at liberty to give at any and everything which you believe or profess to believe is a charity, and to any amount you may think proper. You will very easily perceive that what a wide door this would open for fraud and corruption and favoritism on the one hand, and robbing the people on the other. Crockett responded, the gentleman continued, "No, Colonel, Congress has no right to give charity. Individual members may give as much of their own money as they please, but they have no right to touch a dollar of the public money for that purpose. There are about 240 members of Congress." Wow, things have changed. There's now 436. If they had shown their sympathy for the sufferers by contributing each 1 week's pay, it would have made for over $13,000. There are plenty of wealthy men in Washington who could have given $20,000 without depriving themselves of even a single luxury of life. The congressmen chose to keep their own money, which, if reports be true, some of them spend not very credibly. And the people about Washington no doubt applauded you for relieving them from the necessity of giving what was not yours to give. The people have delegated to Congress, by the Constitution, the power to do certain things. To do these things, it is authorized to collect and pay monies, and for nothing else. Everything beyond this is usurpation and a violation of the Constitution. By usurpation, we're talking about an act of treason. An act of treason against the American people, for whom the Constitution is intended to serve. That darn that. "I have given you," continued Crockett, "an imperfect account of what he said. Long before he was through," this is Crockett speaking to Ellis again, "long before he was through, I was convinced that I had done wrong." He wound up by saying, "So you see, Colonel, you have violated the Constitution in what I consider a vital point. It is precedent fraught with danger to the country, for when Congress once begins to stretch its power beyond the limits of the Constitution, there is no limit to it and no security for the people. I have no doubt you acted honestly, but that does not make it any better, except as far as you are personally concerned, you see that I cannot vote for you. I tell you, I felt strict. I saw that I should have opposition, and this man should go to talking. He could set others to talking. In this district, I was a gone fawn skin." There's another phrase that you don't hear these days. Basically, done for. There's no way that if this man shared his opinion with anybody else in the district, that Crockett was going to wind up getting reelected. So he continued and said, "I could not answer him. And the fact is, I was so fully convinced that he was right, I didn't want to. But I must satisfy him, and I said to him, 'Well, my friend, you hit the nail upon the head when you said that I had not the sense enough to understand the Constitution. I intended to be guided by it, and I thought I had studied it fully. I have heard many speeches in Congress, but what you have said here at your plow has got more hard, sound sense in it than all the fine speeches I have ever heard. If I'd ever taken the view of it that you have, I would have put my head into the fire before I would have given that vote. And if you'll forgive me and vote for me again, if I ever vote for another unconstitutional law, I wish I may be shot." The farmer laughingly replied, "Yes, Colonel, he was sworn to that once before, but I will trust you again on one condition. You say that you're so convinced that your vote was wrong. Your acknowledgement of it will do more good than defeating you for it. For as you go around the district, you will tell people about this vote, and that you are satisfied it was wrong. I will not only vote for you, but I will do what I can to keep down opposition, and perhaps I may exert some little influence in that way. If I don't," says Crockett, "I wish I may be shot, and convince you that I am in earnest in what I say. I'll come back this way in a week or 10 days, and if you will get a gathering of people, I will make a speech to them. Get up a barbecue, and I'll pay for it." "No, Colonel, we are not rich people in this section, but we have plenty of provisions to contribute for a barbecue, and some to spare for those who have none. The push across will be over in a few days, and we can then afford a day for a barbecue. This is Thursday. I will see to getting up on Saturday I'll see to getting it up on Saturday seek. Come to my house on Friday, and we'll go together, and I promise you a very respectable crowd to see and hear you. Crockett said, Well, I'll be there. But one thing more before I say goodbye. I must know your name. My name is Bunce. Not Horatio Bunce. Yes. Well, Mr. Bunce. I never saw you before, though you say you have seen me, but I know you very well. I am glad to have met you. I'm very proud that I may hope to have you for my friend. You must let me shake your hand before I go. We shook hands and parted that day in gentlemanly friendship and amity. Crockett wasn't done. Ellis continues to write about what Crockett said. It was one of the luckiest hits of my life that I met that man. He mingled but a little with the public, but was widely known for his remarkable intelligence, incorrigible integrity, or incorruptible integrity. I'm incorrigible, he's incorruptible. And for a heart brimful and running over with kindness and benevolence, which showed themselves not only in words but in acts. He was the oracle of the whole country around him, and his fame extended far beyond the circle of his immediate acquaintance. Though I have never met him before, I had heard much of him, but for this meeting, it is very likely I should have had the opposition and been beaten. One thing is very certain: no man could now stand up in that district under such a vote. At the appointed time, I was at his house, having told our conversation to every crowd that I met, to every man I stayed all night with. In fact, I found that it gave the people an interest and a confidence in me stronger than had ever been manifest before. Though I was considerably fatigued when I reached the home of Mr. Bunce, and under extraordinary circumstances could have gone early to bed, I kept him up until midnight talking about the principles and affairs of government, and got more real, true knowledge of them than I had got all my life before. I've told you Mr. Bunce converted me politically. He came nearer converting me religiously than I had ever been before. He didn't make a very good Christian of me, as you know, but he has wrought upon my feelings of reverence for its purifying and elevating power such as I have never felt before. I have known and seen much of him since, for I respect him. No, that's not the word. I reverence and love him more than any living man, and I will go to see him two or three times each year. And I will, you sir, if everyone who professes to be a Christian lived and acted and enjoyed it as he does, the religion of Christ would take the world by storm. But returning to my story, the next morning we went to the barbecue, and to my surprise found about 1,000 men there. I met a good many who I had not known before, and they and my friend introduced me around until I got pretty well acquainted. At least they all knew me. In due time, notice was given that I would speak to them. They gathered up around a stand that had been erected. I opened up the speech by saying, "Fellow citizens," I presented myself before you today, feeling like a new man. My eyes have lately been opened to the truths which ignorance or prejudice or both had heretofore hidden from my view. I feel that I can today offer you the ability to render you more valuable service than I have ever been able to render before. I am here today more for the purposes of acknowledging my error than to seek your votes. That I would make this acknowledgement is due myself as well to you. Whether you vote for me is a matter of your consideration only. I went on to tell them about the fire and my vote and the appropriation, as I have told it to you and then told it to them, why I was satisfied it was wrong. I closed by saying, and now, fellow citizens, it remains only for me to tell you that most of the speech that you've listened to with so much interest was simply a repetition of the arguments by which your neighbor, Mr. Bunce, convinced me of my error. It was the best speech I had ever made in my life, but my friend Horatio Bunce is entitled to the credit for it. And now I hope he is satisfied with his convert that he will get up here and tell you so. He came upon the stand, and he said, "Fellow citizens, it affords me the great pleasure to comply with the request of Colonel Crockett. I have always considered him to be a thoroughly honest man, and I'm satisfied that he will faithfully perform all that he has promised for you today." Well, I went down there, and up from the crowd such a shout for Davy Crockett as his name has never been called forth before. I'm not much given to tears, but I was taken with the choking then, and I felt some big drops rolling down my cheeks. And I tell you now that the remembrance of those few words spoken by such a man and the honest, hearty shout that they produce is worth more to me than all the honors I've received and all the reputation I have ever made or ever shall make as a member of Congress. We're almost done. Now, sir, concluded Crockett, you know why I made that speech yesterday. I have had several thousand copies of it printed and was directing them to my constituents when you came in. There is one thing now which I call to your attention. You remembered that I promised to give a week's pay. There are in that house a very many wealthy men. Men who think nothing of spending a week's pay, or a dozen of them, for a dinner or a wine party when they've had something to accomplish by it. Some of those same men made beautiful speeches upon the debt of gratitude for which the country owed the deceased, a debt which could not be paid by money, and the insignificance and worthlessness of money, particularly no insignificant sum as $10,000 when weighed against the honor of the nation. Yet, not one of those congressmen responded to my proposition. Money with them is nothing but trash when it is to come from the people, but it is the one great thing for which most of them are striving, and many of them sacrifice honor, integrity, and justice to obtain it. And that is a story about Davy Crockett. Pardon me a second here. I've been doing this without my virtual background on. That's a campanula blue bellflower behind me. They make a decent ground cover, incidentally, if you have an interest in starting a food forest. The flowers and the leaves are both edible. And I seem to recall, not too long ago, I put up a poll and asked if you were not going to be punished for accepting stolen money, would you accept it? And I think the last time I looked at that poll, about 61% of the people who responded said, no, I wouldn't take it. So there's some hope left. There's some hope left in this country. There are still people out there that, if they aren't of decency and honor and integrity, at least would like to convince the rest of us that they are. Yes, John, that's a Campanula porskayeska trailing blue bellflower. I tried to grow them once, but I didn't have enough shade, so they died off. Unfortunately, we'll try again here whenever we've got enough shade going. I'm going to back up and have a look at comments real quick. Ooh, got a bunch of people stopped in. Sassafras Red may be allergic to corn pollen. Oh no. I know I'm allergic to whatever is in hay. Whenever it was hay baling season when I was a kid, I'd always break out something bad and get the sniffles. It's probably just grass pollen. Vicky has a habit of finding small local heirloom nurseries. Those are always nice because you never know what you're going to find. You can find things that nobody else has. It's also one of the reasons why I said, if you can find a particular type of tree, maybe 5 or 6 that are out of the way, unusual, unordinary, things that not everybody has or nobody else has, you've got an opportunity to create a thriving business producing those. You can produce a few other things too, the average stuff that everybody has, but that core 5 or 6 different things that nobody has except for you, they'll sell out. They'll sell out the day they go up for sale. Does BT work on grasshoppers? I do not know. Spinosad does. So sassafras was hand pollinating, and that's when you got the itchy eyes and running nose. Now, thank you very much. Let's see. Drops is talking to his girlfriend. Let's see. None of your business at Lake Eufaula. Cool. Haven't been out that way in a while. We're right up here on the Arkansas River. I mean, it's behind me about 700-800 yards. Sort of in between Sand Springs and Tulsa. Vicky said, found one nursery that specialized in Appalachian heirloom beans and tomatoes. It's kind of cool. Hidden Springs Nursery in Tennessee has a lot of really nice stuff that's native to the mountains. If you're looking for perennials, they've got probably more pawpaws than any other place I've ever seen. I'd love to have pawpaws, but we only have about a third of an acre to work with here, so I can't keep that many. Yeah, I was a kid the last time we were out there, and I think I lost a fishing rod. I had the hook baited, and I had it out in the water, and somebody got my attention, and I think we were doing a cookout, and there was a hot dog ready for me or something like that. And I put the rod down, and I went, and by the time I was coming back with the hot dog, the rod was going into the water, and I never saw it again. It was a Zebco, so it's probably still good. We don't have a Telegram group yet. If somebody wants to start one, you can. But this is the phone that that's weird. Woohoo! My green screen is glitching. This is the phone that I use. I don't think I can connect to Telegram with it. Hugo Homestead's in the house. All right. Renaissance Farms has a ton of interesting tomato seeds. Cool. I'm not technologically challenged. It's just we got so many different means of connecting. It's just crazy. Uncensored free group chats. Woo-hoo. Kind of like getting on a party chat on an online game. That's pretty uncensored and free speech. Elton says Greg's got the bug. He needs to stop only sleeping 4 hours a night and running himself ragged. But keep him in your prayers. And remind him to take a break every now and then. All right, let's see. Alan says, "What's on the reading list tonight?" Well, you just heard that. That's from some memoirs written by former Congressman Ellis regarding the late Davy Crockett. I believe after that point, Crockett joined the Whig Party, made a bid for president, didn't make it, and wound up going off to Texas, where he met his end at the Alamo. Different time and different era. Should there be homework? Green Greg's got the crud. Oh. There's about 4 varieties of the crud that go around and we get infected with on the average about 3 or 4 times a year. Hopefully it's one of those. Eric saying it sounds like a government giving all that money to Ukraine that's not theirs to get. Well, it's not just Ukraine, it's at every turn. And I did mention I was gonna come back around to this later on, because there's 2 ways that. That's so weird. There's 2 ways. Two two ways that government winds up stealing from us. And one is on the front end through taxation. We're all familiar with that. We feel that on April 15th. The other is through the back door with inflation, where they inflate the monetary supply. So it robs the value out of every dollar that we have. And this, as Crockett said, like the tariffs, which have an indirect effect and affect the poorest among us, because whenever you don't have that much money to begin with, whenever your money doesn't buy as much as it did yesterday, you really do feel the pinch. And I think a lot of us are feeling the pinch, and we're not all poor. Homestead Oz is in the house. Good day. Got a gardens in the house. Vicky says that recorded conversation has massive implications for yeah. I was going to talk a little bit about not cutting trees but planting them. See, right now there's a fellow going around to the different nations of the world. His name is, he goes by Sadhguru. He's a yogi, and he has a certain amount of influence politically. Certainly, lots of people come out to hear him talk. He says a lot of things that make a lot of sense, particularly the need that we have for improving the soil of the planet. Currently, most of the soil that's being farmed has about 3 to 5% organic matter, which is not a whole heck of a lot. And it's hard to grow decent quality food in soil that has such little organic matter. It's hard for it to maintain water. You have to have the organic matter to hold on to the water, to feed the bacteria, to feed the fungal life in the soil, to harvest the minerals from the soil to bring them to the plants so you have good, healthy food. So the current drive he's on is to get farmers to plant up at least 10% of their land in trees. Now, I agree with that concept. Actually, I'd go with a bit more than 10% in trees. In all actuality, I'd shoot for maybe about a 50% canopy. Not just overstory, but throw in some understory and a bit of shrub layer too, and maybe have just enough room to run your combine down one row and then back again in between belts of trees. Now that, of course, would keep the soil in place, not being blown away by the wind or washed away whenever it does rain. It would improve the soil organic matter tremendously and reduce the need for fertilizers and pesticides to a certain extent, because that belt of trees and hedgerows on either side of a field will make an excellent place for the predators to hide. Where I differ with them is by the way we're going about spreading this particular message. He's trying to put the pressure on politicians to do something. Unfortunately, have you ever known a politician to do the right thing? We might get that 10% trees planted, but it's not going to be in a way that winds up being beneficial for anybody except for the politicians and whoever happens to be lining their pockets through their thievery. Anyway, moving on. Today, Crockett's spokesperson would spin it in a different way to ensure that Crockett's corporate sponsors would not be upset. Yeah, we're in an entirely different age these days. Thank you, Elton. Is he having a live stream tonight? Has he posted? Do you know? Might drop in and say hello. And a lot of the time he winds up going live later on in the evening and I've already gone to bed. Trump says, I don't believe in the Father. I know the Father. Oh, that's awesome news. Drops says I was talking to the better half. She's coming here since she's got the benefits straightened out in North Carolina. So she's coming home, and she wants to buy a home in Arkansas. So that's where we're headed. You guys are going to be right around down the street and around the corner from us. Vicky saying, back then, most did have integrity, or at least aspired to display it. I did say this quite often. It's like, people are good. If they're not good, they at least don't want to be seen as being bad. But I do believe that, generally speaking, most people are good, but people are led to do bad things. But without those influences, they would be true to their nature and be good, simply because we have faith in what was written in Genesis, where God made everything and saw that it was good. If it was created good, then it is good. But people can be led to do bad things. All right. Mary's saying, bought the house randomly next to Mom's. Sold the heck out of black raspberry. Guess what we're potting up for next week? So you're selling black raspberry plants? That's cool. Calling man a politician was a deadly insult. You politician, you. Saying northern Arkansas or southern. It's going to be warmer in southern. You're going to have more pine trees in southern Arkansas. But if you're in northern Arkansas, particularly northeast Arkansas, you're going to be in the Ozarks. And it's a really nice place to be. Yeah, some really good conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses. So you got some stuff from Hidden Springs. I got let's see, what did I get? Our goji berry, the LA Agnes multiflora I got from them. I think I got something else, but I can't recall what it was off the top of my head. Try West Arkansas, right there on the Ozarks. It's a good spot. So Southwest Missouri is really nice, and I think the same is going to hold true whether or not you're in Southwest Missouri or you're in Northwest Arkansas. Either way, whenever you get there, you're not going to be trusted by the people who are there initially, because you're going to be an outsider. It's hill country, and even if they figure out that you're a decent guy, they may call you a Jasper, and it might be your kids that wind up fitting in. But they do make good neighbors. But people are very stubborn and very independent in that part of the world. Let's see, who else do I know up there? Simply Jan, actually. Simply Jan Homestead. She's up by Lake Stockton. She's out that way. Vicky's out that way. Who else is out that way? Simply Jan's in Missouri, though. She's Southwest Missouri. I'm not sure about Hood's Custom Shop. I don't know exactly where David's at. Ed's Crazy Ed's is in Southwest Missouri. He's in Taney County. I know exactly where he's at. I could find his place in the dark. All right. It's in mid area, Missouri Arkansas border. Right around Bull Shoals Lake is good. What is she up to now? A different time, but what it was allowed back then is, yeah. Well, even back then, the concern was people are setting precedent, and what is tolerated one day is winds up being embraced the next. Right? That's the way it always works. So that ability of Congress to just appropriate funds and spend them the way they saw fit, even if it was public funds being spent for whatever they saw fit, was a bad precedent. And Mr. Butts was very correct. That's where we got to. The Fighting Fedora. I haven't seen you before, or maybe I have. I don't recall. From Nebraska. We'd like a more significant part in the Second Civil War. Any suggestions? Oh, I don't know. I'm probably the last person you want to talk to on this particular topic, but if Texas winds up going, I'm saying that Oklahoma should go with her, and hopefully Louisiana, Arkansas, and Missouri will go along too. And if Nebraska wants to come along for the party, that'd be great. Shoot, we might even take Illinois as long as they agree to ditch Chicago. Are you saying Seguro, not politically savvy? Well, okay, so this is the problem. Most people think that in order to get anything done, you have to apply the pressure on the politicians because this is where the power is. But the problem is the only power that government has is the power of initiating violence. Governments don't ask. They don't make suggestions. They don't say, wouldn't it be nice if you all just did this sort of thing over here? Wouldn't that all be nice? They don't do that. They say you are going to do this, or you're not going to do that, or else. And the or else is violent force, unfortunately. So whenever you go out there and you're voting for a politician to do something, or you're voting for a politician, what you're really doing is asking for government to engage in initiation of violent force against your neighbors, your family, your friends, even yourself. It's self-defeating and it's stupid. But that's the system we live under, right? So you just have to do it. Otherwise, the other guy get elected. I don't propose that we do anything to overthrow the government or change the current system. What I do propose is we recognize what the flaws in that system are, and whenever it suffers the natural and inevitable death that it will suffer, we don't rush to go create another one just like it. You're going to see Green Briggs in the morning? Oh, yeah, he usually does, like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, midnight. Vic is saying, agricultural mismanagement has turned the fertile crescent into the devastating crescent. The archaeological record is very clear. Yeah, typically, extensive farming operations. Let's see, farming is probably not the right word. I can't remember who said this. And I want to give the credit to the person that the credit is due to. Farming is one thing, and mining is another. If we go out to an area like the Great Plains was once upon a time, with lots of organic matter built up over thousands of years by first the mastodons, then by the bison, and we start tearing up that covering over the soil, tearing up the tall grass berry, plowing in the sod, planting seeds in it, and then using up the organic matter that was in the soil. If we do that, we are mining the fertility of the soil. And eventually, you start having to add inputs like nitrogen fertilizers, urea fertilizers, extra potassium, extra phosphorus back into the soil to actually grow the crops. So what we're doing for most of our industrial agriculture is putting inputs back into the soil just to grow the crops to the point where we produce an edible fruit or whatever that particular crop happens to be. But as far as the other components that are supposed to be in that food, the mineral components of that food, since there isn't a lot of organic matter, there isn't the availability for the microorganisms in the soil to carry those micronutrients to the plants as they're growing. They don't have the micronutrients in them that they would have once upon a time. So the man is correct when he says, yeah, a few generations back, you could eat an orange and you were eating good food. Now you have to eat 7, 8 oranges to get the same kind of minerals that one orange once upon a time had, simply because the minerals have been mined out of the soil and there's nothing putting them back into it. So we need to work on not being miners. We can be farmers, but not miners. And most farmers, unfortunately, on the industrial scale are miners of the soil. All right, so yeah, you guys are selling black raspberry plants? I might hit you up for some. I don't have any. Vicky says it's a biblical curse for people to be ruled by women and children. I probably better not say anything on that. Which is a clear indication that it's true, huh? Okay, this is what we're saying. Some people have actually chosen. Yeah, some people have. Some people have deliberately chosen to be evil. Some people even, simply because of their outrage at usually family members and the way they feel that they were treated by members of a particular religious organization, have rejected the concept of God entirely, or it's not that they don't believe in God. They just hate God and choose to do things that are evil because they hate God. They'll still call themselves atheists. Go figure that one out. Behind every great man is a good woman. That's what they want you to believe. Joe is saying Jasper is a nickname. Yeah, it's okay. Jasper is hill country slang. It's hill country slang for they're a good person, but they're not a local. So we don't know if we trust them entirely. They look good, but we'll see. That's a Jasper. And it's kind of interesting that the Ozarks and Appalachia have some very similar characteristics as far as the people living in them goes. Vic is saying, guarantee in northern and southern Arkansas, two entire. Oh, yeah, because southern Arkansas is not hill country. Hill country is different. Mary's saying, notice they never fixed that part in the Constitution about. Well, yeah, we could really get into some issues with the U.S. Constitution if we wanted to spend all night on it. Back in 1787, there was the Second Constitutional Convention that met to fix the problems with the America's Constitution. See, the United States of America as a country existed from 1781 all the way through 1787. This first president was John Hanson. This very last president was a guy by the name of Cyrus Griffin. Did they teach you guys this in school? Probably didn't teach you this in school. Okay, so July 4th, 1776, the war had already started. It started back in 1775 in April, whenever the British marched on Lexington and Concord to seize the armories there, trying to deprive the colonists, the people living in North America, of their means of self-defense, the weapons that were there. The people gathered together on the green in Lexington and stood against the English army. Said, no, you're not going to do that. They were fired upon by the English. They fired back. Several people died. It wasn't a big deal, except that was the very beginning of the American Revolutionary War. Now, come July 4th, 1776, the various states met together. Well, they sent delegations to meet together in Philadelphia, where they drafted what's called the Declaration of Independence. Great document, outlined the principles by which this new separation, this attempt to separate away from Great Britain, was being performed, and what the intention was behind it. That was what the Declaration of Independence was for. That was the document that got all the people that were going to wind up joining the Continental Army to go and join, because they wanted to fight for this concept, this idea of independence. That's the thing that we feel pride and patriotism about on the 4th of July, when we celebrate the Declaration of Independence and what we call the birth of the country. The country was formed in 1781 when they actually came together, the various delegations, or various delegates from the several states, and drafted a constitution. That constitution, the very first constitution of the United States, was called the Articles of Confederation. And the United States of America became a confederation of sovereign states. There were 13 sovereign states in a union under the Articles of Confederation. The war was fought under Articles of Confederation, and this particular arrangement persisted all the way up until 1787. Now, somewhere along the way, guys, some of you have heard this story before, so I already know. The various states wound up raising bonds or levying bonds to pay for the war debt. Each state had its own bonds that it issued to pay for the war debt, pay for the war effort. These bonds were held by individual citizens for the most part, and there was some concern about whether or not the states would actually get around to paying off all the bonds. And as a result, speculators would go and find the people that held bonds. They would post in the newspapers. If they knew a friend, like, say, Benjamin Franklin, who owned a printing press and ran newspapers, they would post advertisements. Hey, if you've got bonds and you would like to get paid now, we will pay a certain amount on the dollar of the value of that bond. And these investors, speculators, included the guy who ran the bank in New York City. His name was Alexander Hamilton. He wasn't actually from the colonies. He was from the Caribbean, but he got himself installed in New York and established a bank there. He and his friends bought up a large amount of this debt. This brings us up to, as I said, 1786, 1787, whenever the idea of doing something about the Articles of Confederation, because it just wasn't really getting the job done, came up. The Second Constitutional Convention was convened in Philadelphia. The delegates went there, and they were pitched the idea of abandoning the Articles of Confederation and establishing a brand new constitution, granting power to a federal government instead of allowing the power to remain in the hands of the several sovereign states. There was a certain benefit to doing this. It would concentrate the power in the hands of a very few people. Those few people would most likely be the delegates who were there at the convention in the first place. Quite a few of them were swayed by it. At least one of them, one of the delegates from the great state of Virginia by the name of Patrick Henry, didn't want to have anything at all to do with this arrangement. Said, "I smell a rat." He stood up and walked out of the convention. Unfortunately, he was one of the few that had integrity and principle. The rest of them liked the power and liked the profit that they could make. And so they signed on for this new constitution. One of the first things that was done under it, after establishing a federal government, was to consolidate all of that war debt. Remember the war debt that we were talking about just a minute ago? They consolidated the war debt. This is 1791. And in order to pay it off at face value, they levied a tax on whiskey. This led to what's called the Whiskey Rebellion, which accelerated in intensity until 1794, when George Washington levied 13,000 conscripts marched on the state of Pennsylvania in order to put down the rebellion and arrest the people that were refusing to pay this tax on whiskey, because they weren't really all that excited about giving up their hard-earned money to enrich the few politically connected in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, nobody stood up to come to Pennsylvania's aid at that time and do anything about this new federal government. People were probably sick from having just fought a Revolutionary War, and they didn't want to have another one. And so that system has stayed in place for 235 years, and we find ourselves now at this particular junction. I'm not suggesting the overthrow of the United States federal government. I'm just saying that should it happen to fall by the wayside at some particular point in time, we know what went wrong, and let's not repeat that mistake. Anyway, been here for over an hour, and I'm getting kind of hot. Let's see. Eric is saying Indiana is a red state as well. Okay, yeah. Indiana can join. We'll call ourselves the United States of America, maybe. I don't know. Eric is saying Nebraska can just lay low and see who wins. Oh, there we go. Build that wall at the 80 and let Chicago feed itself. Mm-hmm. I've lived in Chicago before. It's different. Me too. Me myself says, I remember Dad calling someone a Jasper when I was a child. Never found out how Jasper meant anything. Well, that's the meaning. It's a person. It's an outsider that seems like an okay person, but they're still an outsider. I don't know if a dog counts. Vic is saying that's why we have the 10th Amendment reserved to we the people, everything not specifically delegated to the federal government, and that would be wonderful. If only the Senate and the House of Representatives and the President and the Vice President and the Supreme Court justices actually respected the Constitution instead of trying to circumvent it at every opportunity. So the problem is they were given too much power. They were given enough power that they can actually get away with ignoring the Constitution whenever it suits them. And that's the main problem. We have to, if we ever have the opportunity to set up another social organization system again, not give so much power to so few people. Howdy Garden saying good night. Have a blessed night. Thank you very much. Ooh, it's almost 10 o'clock. Drops to say you mean second constitution. Yeah, we had, yeah, okay, so there were 14 presidents of the Congress of the United States, and then there were 8 under the Articles of Confederation. So there were 14 altogether, and then there were 8 during the time that there was actually a constitution. But yeah, Drops is correct. There was 14 altogether. John Hancock was one of them, by the way. Articles of Confederation. Not the same thing as Confederate States of America. It was way, way before. See, Vicky, this is the reason why the house is a mess. American Girl saying becoming a princess is a lofty goal. I don't know. It's weird though. I want equal rights, and I also want to be a princess. I have no problem with the girls being princesses, just as long as we get to be princes. Yep. Eric, enjoy the history lesson. Thank you, Eric. I'm getting ready to hang it up. I think we're getting close to the bottom of the comments here. It says, look up the fate of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Most were dead or destitute by the end of the war. We are a country in a minute with their money where their mouth was. You'll notice that John Hancock never went on to become president of the new United States. We could say in quite a few states, the cities are blue and the rural areas and small towns are red. Yeah, well, yeah, it's a different set of values whenever you're in a position where people bring you things. If you're out there in the countryside, you have to make do for yourself. That's the way you live. Otherwise, you don't make it. And in the city, you have to have people bring you things. In order to make sure that people can bring you things, you need the money. You need the ability to tell people to bring you stuff. In reference to ditching the monarchy. No. The Greeks had democracy and it sucked. It wasn't good. That's an interesting argument. Because of the 10th Amendment, we have the authority to dismantle the government and start over. I don't think a piece of paper gives us that authority. I think our natural rights as human beings give us that authority. I believe that rights don't come from a piece of paper. I believe they come from our natural state as human beings. But we do need to reclaim our natural state as human beings. Part of that, of course, is independence. So get out there and grow your own food and be able to separate yourself from the beast, the machine that's grinding everything in its path to dust. Guys, it's been about an hour and a half. I'm going to go ahead and call it a night. I hope you guys had a good time. Maybe you found it entertaining or informative. If so, you know what to do. I'll catch you next time. But until then, get out there, get growing.